Afternoon, everybody. My name's Natalie Cole, and I'm the Assistant Bureau Chief in Library Development Services at the California State Library. Thank you for joining us at this information session for the State Library's 2021-2022 Competitive Library Services and Technology Act, LSTA, grant program, which is supported by the Institute of Museum and Library Services Grants to States program. We do ask that you please keep your camera off and keep yourself on mute for the entirety of the session. The presentation is being recorded. If you turn your camera or microphone on, you may be included in the recording. Today, we'll be going over the competitive opportunities that we have available for the coming fiscal year, and specifically the intent to apply form, which is the first form you have to complete if you're interested in applying for a grant. If you have any questions, please put them in the chat and we'll address them all at the end. If we aren't able to get to your question before the end of the session, we will follow up with you afterwards. You can also find the information we're presenting today on the LSTA competitive grants page of the State Library's website. The URL for that page is on a slide at the end of the presentation. I'd like to start by introducing my colleagues who are presenting with me today. Please don't hesitate to be in touch with any of us if you have questions about the competitive grant opportunities. First, we have our LSTA coordinator, Lynn Oliva. Lynn is the person to contact with questions about application and reporting processes and procedures, and anything to do with LSTA rules and regulations. Next, we have our team of library programs consultants, who are the people to contact with questions about the content of your application. Meg DePriest specializes in data and collections and is our state data coordinator. Lena Pham and Beth Schwartzberg specialize in continuing education, and they lead our new California Libraries Learn program, CALL. And Chris Durr, Shana Sojourner, Jody Thomas, and I specialize in community engagement. Chris focuses on school-aged children and teens and technology. Shana focuses on early learners and leads our ELF program. Jody focuses on adults, including support for veterans and workforce development. And I focus on summer reading and adult and family literacy services. And now I'll hand it over to Lynn.
Hello, I'm Lynn. I'm the State Library's LSTA coordinator. The California State Library's competitive LSTA grant opportunities help California libraries respond effectively to local needs and align services with local community aspirations, support experimentation and research and development in California's libraries, and provide training and support in grant writing and grant management for the California library community. We invite libraries to apply for funding to support projects that address community needs, align with community aspirations, and reflect the agency's support of equity, diversity, and inclusion. And back to Natalie.
Thanks, Lynn. As always, our competitive grants program is designed to ensure we meet the goals set out in California's LSTA 5-year plan, which is available on the State Library's website. For the 2021-2022 fiscal year, we're especially interested in projects that are focused on underserved and vulnerable populations, sustainability, and workforce development. Applications from library jurisdictions and branches that have not received LSTA funding in the last 5 years, and collaborative projects that represent a variety of regions, library sizes, and populations. However, again, as always, we welcome applications from all libraries and library consortia and on any topic and serving any group. We define underserved and vulnerable populations as populations who access or receive fewer services and who encounter barriers to accessing services. We define sustainability using the American Library Association's triple bottom line framework of sustainability, the intersection of environmental stewardship, economic feasibility, and social equity. And we define workforce development as efforts to support employment, economic opportunities, and economic development, and improve individuals' employment potential. And you can find definitions of the terms we're using in our grant guide. There are 2 types of grant opportunity available: local grants that focus on a single jurisdiction and can focus on a single branch, and collaborative grants that support projects implemented by multiple libraries. And Meg will talk about those in more detail in a moment. And now I'll hand it over to Jody.
Hello, my name is Jody Thomas, and I work on programs and initiative for adults, as Natalie mentioned earlier. So what are the eligibility requirements? Well, you have to adhere to the LSTA guidelines on eligibility. That's found on the California State Library website. The URL for the LSTA grant information will be offered at the end of our presentation. You must also adhere to the federal restrictions on funding. There are strict rules about what the funds can and cannot be spent on, also available on the State Library's website. When writing your grant, this is the place to check on whether a cost is allowable. Monies must be used according to the uniform administrative requirements, cost principles, and audit requirements for federal awards. There are federal standards we must adhere to. Must comply with the Children's Internet Protection Act, CIPA, in order to purchase devices that can connect to and browse the internet. And lastly, public libraries must participate in the Public Library Survey each year. So that covers eligibility. Projects will be selected in the spring of 2021, and the funding period starts when the California state budget is signed and ends on June 30th, 2022. Typically, the budget is signed July 1, at least that's always the goal. And now I want to turn it over to my colleague, Chris Durr, who will talk to you about project partners.
Hi, everyone. My name is Chris Durr. I'm a libraries program consultant. Thank you so much, Jody. So I'm going to tell you about project partners. There's going to be two categories of project partners that we're going to be concerned with. The first being a formal project partner, and that's going to be a cooperating institution in which you have a signed formal agreement, sometimes usually called a memorandum of understanding or MOU. They're going to contribute resources, materials, funds, staff time, some amalgamation of those materials to one or more of the project activities as outlined later in the application. Agencies applying for local competitive grants of $75,000 or more, and agencies applying for collaborative competitive grants must plan to work with a project partner and should have a project partner in place before a full project application is submitted. For the intent to apply period, you don't necessarily need a full signed agreement between your project partner and yourself. It can just be a projected project partner. But by the time the full project application is submitted, you should have a formal project partner in place. The other type of partner that you should be concerned with is a community connection. And that's going to be a cooperating institution or agency, which is going to share in some of the work or goals that you're trying to achieve in the project, but doesn't necessarily rise to the necessity of having a formal signed agreement with them. So these two types of partners will be helpful in executing your grant and making sure that the outcomes you achieve are the best that is possible for your community, but are required for, that is, project partners are required for grants above a certain dollar amount, and community connections is required for all other grants. And now I turn it over to Bev.
Thanks, Chris. I'm Bev Schwartzberg, Library Programs Consultant. To support local, regional, and statewide information sharing, and to help ensure that LSTA funding has the greatest impact, successful applicants will be grouped into cohorts around similar project areas and will be convened during the project year via Zoom to share their progress, successes, and lessons learned with other grant recipients. And now I'm turning it over to Meg DePriest.
Thank you, Bev. I'm Meg DePriest, another library programs consultant. I get to tell you about the two types of grants, local competitive grants and collaborative competitive grants. So local competitive grant process is open to California libraries. Libraries with up to 14 outlets may apply for one local grant. Those with between 15 and 30 outlets may apply for 2 local grants, and libraries with 31 or more outlets may apply for 3 local grants. If you apply for a local competitive grant, you may also apply for a collaborative competitive grant. Awards will range between a minimum of $10,000 and a maximum of $100,000. A library applying, as Chris mentioned earlier, should have at least one community connection in place before submitting the full application, but this doesn't need to be confirmed before submitting your intent to apply form. And again, as Chris mentioned, libraries requesting $75,000 or above should have at least one project partner in place for the full application, not needing to be confirmed for the intent to apply form. Applicant libraries are encouraged to contribute a local match to the grant funds in the form of cash match or an in-kind contributions. All proposed expenditures must comply with federal restrictions on the use of LSTA grant funds, and you may not re-grant or redistribute LSTA funds to another agency. For the collaborative competitive grant process, this is open to California libraries, library consortia, and library-focused nonprofit organizations. A library consortium, or a nonprofit may apply for and participate in up to 2 collaborative competitive grant opportunities. As I mentioned in the previous slide, libraries that apply for a collaborative competitive grant may also apply for a local competitive grant. Collaborative competitive grant applications should include at least 3 California libraries, and submissions must be signed by representatives from all participating libraries. You may not apply speculatively on behalf of other agencies. Intent to apply forms and full applications may be submitted by one lead agency or by multiple participating agencies, for example, 3 partnering library jurisdictions. Awards range from a minimum of $50,000 to a maximum of $250,000 for a collaborative project. Applicants should have at least one community connection and one project partner in place before submitting a full application, and these don't need to be confirmed when you submit your intent to apply. The project partner should not be a library or library consortium. As with local grants, applicants are encouraged to contribute a local match in the form of cash or in-kind contributions. And grant recipients may not re-grant or distribute LSTA funds to another agency. And along those lines, I'm going to emphasize this again. If you are applying as a collaborative, you can have one entity complete the application and be the recipient of funds, or you can have some or all libraries in the collaborative project apply individually. The way you title your project in the application will help us connect your applications, and we encourage you to communicate with us to make sure this happens. If you opt to submit one application, the agency that applies receives the funds. That entity cannot give funds to others in the collaborative. So they manage the budget, they do all the purchasing for the project, and they cannot re-grant funds to other libraries in the collaborative. If each library in the collaborative submits a separate but connected application, each library will manage a portion of the budget, and each library can make purchases for their library. It'll be good to talk to your finance people and to each other to determine the best way to go about this application process. And if you have any hesitations, any questions, don't hesitate to contact Lynn, the LSTA coordinator. And now I'm going to pass this over to my colleague, Lena.
Hi, everyone. I'm Lena Pham, and I'll be going over the application process. So this local and collaborative grant opportunity has a 2-step application process, which is the intent to apply phase and the full application phase. For the intent to apply phase, there are a few things to note. One is anyone interested in applying for the grant must submit an intent to apply form. Applicants that submit an intent to apply form may choose not to submit a full application. However, only applicants that have submitted an intent to apply form will be eligible to submit a full application. Once your intent to apply form is reviewed, selected applicants will be invited to phase 2, which is completing a full application. An invitation to submit a full application is not a guarantee of funding. For those who have been invited to submit a full application, a project advisor will be assigned to you to provide coaching and support in completing the full application. Applicants will be asked to submit a planning tool with the application, and this planning tool is intended to help you in developing and planning your project. It will not be used to evaluate your application. Not all applicants are guaranteed to receive funding. Successful applicants will be assigned a grant monitor and a project advisor, and will be required to connect and share information with other grantees, as Bev mentioned. Now I'll turn it over to Shauna.
Thanks, Lena. My name is Shauna Sojourner, and I'm a library programs consultant responsible for projects around early learners. And I'll now walk you through the application process timeline. The intent to apply form opened on October 12th, 2020, and is available for download and review on the State Library's LSTA webpage. Applicants have until November 20th of this year to submit completed intent to apply forms. And by December 18th of 2020, State Library staff will notify applicants of decisions. Also by December 18th of 2020, State Library staff will invite applicants to enter phase 2 of the process and provide applicants with full application materials. Applicants will then have just over 2 months to complete the full application and submit by the February 24th, 2021 submission deadline. And on April 9th of 2021, State Library staff will notify applicants of the decisions on the full applications. Please note that while projects will be selected in the spring of 2021, awards cannot be made until federal IMLS funding levels are confirmed for the 2021-2022 year and the 2021-2022 California state budget has passed. The grant funding period starts when the California state budget is signed, again, generally around July 1st of 2021, and ends June 30th of 2022. During this time, libraries implement your project activities. The State Library will also provide grantees with opportunities to meet, to share strategies, resources, ideas, successes, and lessons learned while implementing your projects. In the fall of 2022, and shortly after the grant funding period concludes, LSTA coordinator Lynn Oliva will survey all grantees and request feedback on the overall grant process. Project advisors will also conduct information debriefs with grantees to which they are assigned to discuss successes and lessons learned to share back with stakeholders. And I'll now turn it back over to Natalie.
Thank you, Shauna. The intent to apply form will be evaluated out of a total of 80 possible points. The evaluation matrix is weighted with 3 items worth 16 points each, 2 items worth 12 points each, and 1 item worth 8 points. The points are part of a holistic grant review, and they're not the sole factor determining reviewers' decisions. There are also some non-point questions with qualifying answers that will affect the overall decision. Here you can see how the items are weighted in the evaluation matrix. The most points are available for information provided in the following areas. Community knowledge and assessment. Is there a demonstrated need or aspiration for this project? And is the applicant aware of community assets? Does the project respond to the stated community needs and/or aspirations? Will the targeted audience be involved in program planning and implementation in a meaningful way? After that, there are 12 points available for information provided about evaluation. Does the project include an effective evaluation plan that relates to the stated needs? And project partners and community connections. Does the project include or have a plan to include strong and relevant project partners and/or community connections? And then 8 points are available for information provided about the budget. Is the budget realistic? The 7 items that won't be given points are, number 1, does the applicant agency demonstrate a commitment to equity, diversity, and inclusion? Is the project well thought out? Is it feasible? We will also consider whether the project is likely to have an impact, whether the project aligns with one or more of the State Library's focus areas. Has the library received an LSTA grant in the last 5 years? And for collaborative projects, does the project include a variety of library sizes and communities? The items in the evaluation matrix are designed both to help reviewers assess the applications and to identify the kind of support applicants might need if they move to the full application stage, and the support they might need in implementing their project if the application is successful. And now I'll hand back to Lynn.
So the slide in front of you just lists our contact information for all of us here at the State Library. And we just want to emphasize that the State Library team is here to support you. Please feel free to reach out to any of us at any time. We are happy to answer questions and provide clarity as needed. And back to Natalie for some questions.
Thanks, Lynn. And so we do encourage you, if you have any questions after this presentation, to put them into the chat and we will answer them. So I did just see one come through while we were speaking from Susie. If a library is part of a consortium that received a collaborative grant, LSTA, in the last 5 years, does that preclude the individual library from applying for a local competitive grant now? And no, not at all. And in fact, you could be part of a collaborative grant this year and also apply for a local competitive grant. We are really encouraging people to apply if you haven't received a grant recently, but that doesn't preclude you from applying if you have received grants from us recently, not at all. Could you please tell us when these slides and recording will be made available and where? Thank you. We will send the slides and recording out to all registrants, and all the information that we're presenting on is available on our grants webpage, which actually is on the next slide. So let's take a quick look at that. And that gives you the URL on the State Library's website where you can find all of the materials, including a link to the application forms and a grant guide that covers everything that we've just spoken about. And thank you, Lena, for putting that into the chat so people can cut and paste that. Okay. Kelly has a question about the copycat grants, specifically the 3D design coaching grant. If you want to type that in, you could do that, or you could contact Lena separately. Lena coordinates the copycat grants. And so, yeah, Lena says for copycat grants, contact her directly and she would be glad to answer your questions. Thanks, Lena. And we can stay on as long as anyone would like if you think of any questions that we didn't cover during the presentation. Can you tell us how much you will be allocating this year? As the presentation mentioned, all the allocations and decisions are reliant on how much funding we received from IMLS. In the past, for local and regional grants, we have allocated approximately $2 million, and we hope to be able to do the same or very similar. But that is an approximate amount at this stage. Is there a current listing of awarded grants from the last cycle to get ideas of programs that have been funded? We do have information about previously awarded grants. Unfortunately, we don't have last year's grants available, but we will be working on that and making that available as soon as we can. If you have questions about any particular topics or that you're thinking of, don't hesitate to be in touch and we can talk about those. We do definitely encourage you to be in communication with your communities, knowing about what their aspirations are and their needs are, and designing programs to meet those needs. So we welcome hearing about those, whether it's something we funded in the past or whether it isn't. And Kathy asks, what is the difference between a grant monitor and an advisor? I'm not sure if that's the correct title. What role will each play? So the grant monitor for either most or all of our projects will be Lynn. She's our LSTA coordinator and she will be monitoring our LSTA funded programs for compliance. You will have an advisor assigned to you who will help you implement your project. So they can help you along the way, they can respond to questions, they can give you coaching in how to manage a project, in how to create partnerships, anything that will help your project improve and be the best that it can. And Lena, thank you for putting the link up, and Meg to the previous grants. Thank you very much. Regarding timeline, I thought I read somewhere that copycat grants had a deadline of November 9th, but now I'm seeing November 20th for intent to apply. Are there 2 deadlines depending on the grant? Yes, that's right. And something that's really important to remember as well is that the copycat grants are for this fiscal year. So the copycats are smaller opportunities. They're for replicating projects that have already taken place, either funded with LSTA or perhaps another project that you're aware of that you want to apply to replicate. Lena, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the funding period for that starts in the new year and goes through August. And the competitive grants that we're talking about today, these are applications that you'll be making this fiscal year for projects that would start in the next fiscal year. So July 1, 2021. They're 2 separate opportunities. If you, as I said, if you had questions about the copycats, don't hesitate to be in touch with Lena after the presentation. And the materials we're talking about today are for the competitive local and collaborative grants that we will receive applications for and select this fiscal year, and the activities will take place next fiscal year. Jody has reminded me that advisors, in addition to helping you implement the project, will be available to anybody who has had an intent to apply form successfully received and has moved to the application phase. You will be assigned an advisor who can coach you and support you in writing your full application, because we wanted to provide that support to people. If anybody needs assistance in creating an intent to apply form, please do reach out to us, because we can also connect you with an advisor who can help with that too. I think we're up to date with the questions, but my fellow presenters, let me know if you've spotted something that I've missed.
It's not a question, Natalie, but we have had a couple of people say thank you to us, and we want to thank you all for taking the time to learn about what we're cooking at the State Library here.
Absolutely. Thank you, Chris. Definitely. In terms of a formal agreement, are you looking for an MOU, or would minutes from a meeting approving a project suffice? That is a good question. The formal description of what's needed is in the grant guide, and those are IMLS guidelines about what constitutes a formal partner. And I do believe it's a formal written agreement is the definition. So, and so that's what you would need. But if you don't have that, the agency can definitely be described as a community connection, which you might think of as more of an informal partner. Will there be a webinar on the copycat grants? And also with copycat, is there an intent to apply submission? I don't believe there's going to be a webinar, but Lena, correct me if you are thinking of doing one, and there is no intent to apply submission for that. I can confirm.
Yes, for copycat grants, it's open from now until November 9th, right before midnight. So there's no webinar intended right now, but if folks would like one, I will do one. But I am available pretty much at any time from now before the deadline to answer any questions you might have on it. And yeah, maybe I'll do a weekly or every other week, you know, just conference call, and you can feel free to do that or call me directly.
That would be great. Thanks, Lena. It's great to hear interest in the copycat grants as well as the competitive grants. Any more questions? I'm not seeing any. So, oh, if your library is chosen for a copycat grant, will you be out of the running for the competitive grants? No, not at all. There are separate opportunities. And as we mentioned, although we are really encouraging people who don't ordinarily apply, and if you are a library that doesn't ordinarily apply and you haven't applied recently and you do need assistance, please reach out to us because we are here to help you with that. And although we're encouraging that, we also encourage people who regularly receive, grants from us to apply as well.
Yeah, there are really two different funding cycles for copycat grants. It's this year from December through August of next year. And the local and competitive grants are for starting July of 2021 through June of 2022.
And you've reminded me, Lena, that is something to point out for those of you who've received regional, as they were called in the past, or local grants. The project year ended on August 31st for the last few years, and we are reverting back to a project end date of June 30th. So that's definitely something to be mindful of as you consider your project plans, and if you're selected to submit a full application when you're putting your timeline together. Well, thank you very much to everyone for joining us. If you think of questions as soon as we all log off, don't hesitate to be in touch. Anything to do with processes, procedures, and LSTA IMLS regulations, please reach out to Lynn. And anything to do with the content of your idea, please reach out to any of the rest of the team, and we are here to help you. We will stay on until everybody has logged off in case anyone has any more questions. But otherwise, thank you very much for joining us.